Steve Bannister is a radio enthusiast who has embarked on a dynamic career, starting as a hospital radio station worker and mobile disco DJ in the UK. Currently, he spearheads a project recreating the legendary pirate radio station Laser 558 from the 1980s, using modern technology to create a seamless and clean listening experience, preserving the essence of the past for a new generation of radio enthusiasts. And Steve is with us here. How are you today?
I'm good. It sounds like you don't need me at all. That was perfect. That sums everything up.
So what do you think the appeal is for this station? Because maybe some would argue that you'd want to listen to original content.
Absolutely. And there is a lot of that out there, but there's also, I mean, you've only got to look at radio and TV at the moment, especially TV. There's a massive push for nostalgia. You got talking pictures TV, gold is always been there. So there's a massive push for nostalgia. And at the moment, the 70s and 80s, kind of the place to be.
And what was it that actually drew you to bring this particular station back to life?
It's one of the first stations that I remember listening to that seemed a bit naughty and a bit out of the box. It was dubbed as a pirate radio station, so that I think in itself has that air of, you shouldn't really be listening to this. Having just left school at 16, 17 at the time, it was just all new. All of a sudden, there was this radio station that you could pick up on Sundays and not others that was just all music. At the time, the BBC and the local radio stations weren't allowed to play a whole program just of music. They had what they called needle time, which was less than half of the show's hour, and the rest of the time had to be what they called meaningful talk, which is, I don't know if some people are going to remember the Jimmy Young program, where his recipes and competitions and just inane political chat. It was just, you had to fill the air with talk instead of music.
Yeah.
Which to us now seems odd. It's the other way around.
Yeah. Do you think that there's maybe an appeal for some talk these days? Because a lot of the time you listen to commercial stations, the presenter might talk for like 10 seconds and that's it.
I think what we've got with radio now is we've got so many stations that you have got those niche channels. You've got your talk channels, your sport channels, your oldie stations, your modern music stations, there are so many different stations. Everybody's got their own little niche that they can find the radio that they like listening to. And ironically, it was Laser 558 and the like, but predominantly Laser 558 that paved the way for that. There was all of a sudden, there was this, oh my gosh, we can have a station that is just music. There was like 54 minutes of music per hour. And that was a slogan, that was their mantra, and they stuck with it. So we had a whole generation of people now that were finding that, okay, we can listen to just music. And that kind of shook up the industry and made some big changes because not only were Laser playing all the hits of the time, but they were also dipping back and playing some oldies. And that's the reason why we have now Capital Gold and all the oldies type stations, because Laser showed that people, there was a demand for the older side of music as well as what was being played at the time.
And you mentioned, of course, there's an appeal for nostalgia, but other than that, what do you hope this recreated version of Laser 558 will bring to listeners who maybe didn't experience it the first time round?
It's going to bring, we hope, it's going to bring just the nostalgia effect. It's going to bring, it's a completely automated system as well. So kind of once we've gone back and we've rediscovered all these old off-air recordings that people have made, we've managed to separate the voice from the music and overlay that with modern music again. So what we've done is not only have we recreated the station, we've also found a way to kind of make it an endless station as well, if that makes sense, because we can mix and match the voices. It's not as if we can just have the same voice introducing the same song at the same time of day over and over again. We can play around with that. So we've pretty much created an endless radio station out of the limited number of tapes that were there. So yeah, absolutely, it's a nostalgia. There's a technology effect in there as well. And I think it just gives people a sense of, yeah, I remember this. I mean, Laser boasted at the time around 10 million listeners across Western Europe and the UK. And considering they were broadcasting from the middle of the North Sea, and the signal kept coming in and out, and the amount of problems that they had at the time with the technology and the weather and the funding and everything else, they still managed to attract more listeners in the UK than listening to any other radio station at the time. It's a fantastic story behind it.
You mentioned it's kind of endless. Does it repeat itself eventually?
Obviously the problem you've got is because we're playing music of the time, there are a finite number of tracks.
Yeah.
It's not as if we're Radio 1 and there's always new music coming out, but then that's no different to other niche stations you've got at the moment. Look at Hot 80s, they just play 80s, or Hot 70s, or Absolute. They just play from that niche market. Where we're a little bit different is they are, although, for example, Hard 80s are just playing 80s music, they will play a very small selection of 80s music to kind of keep you listening all day, because they're part of a massive commercial conglomerate. So, they have to attract the listeners. We don't care as much, to put it bluntly. Do you know what I mean? Our music is predominantly from the 80s, because that's we've stuck to the exact same music format that Laser 558 had. So we've got predominantly 80s within the hour, but also dipping into 50s, 60s, 70s, reggae, Motown, Northern Soul. Do you know what I mean? So we can be a bit more varied than other stations can be.
Does it feel like you've stepped back in time when you tune in?
It does, because, as I say, you've got the original DJs, and you've got all their original time announcements, bits of chit chat in between. And honestly, as I say, for someone who grew up listening to Laser 558, even though they were only on air for a short time, not even for 2 years, it is like stepping back in time.
How does the technology work specifically, and did that take a lot of work to try and figure out?
It did, and then it didn't. It was, the hardest part was sourcing a lot of the old broadcasts. The downside is, where there are off-air recordings, you've got AM static, you've got the stations dipping in and out because of weather, and so from the X number of broadcasts that we had, that was then down to so many fewer because of the actual quality. But we actually found a fantastic production company, and they have managed, I don't know how they do it. If you can imagine a song and then breaking it into its two parts, like a karaoke version and then just an a cappella version, they have managed somehow, with all the static and the interference and everything, to separate the voice from the music. And it's absolutely fantastic.
That's amazing, because usually when you see, some people upload on YouTube, they're probably amateurs, but they make an instrumental version of a song by isolating the vocals, and it sounds awful, and you know how they've done it. So does it sound really good, and not like that bad example?
I'll be honest, it sounds as best as we can get it with the quality of the recordings that we had at the time. Do
you think people would maybe enjoy the nostalgia of the static and the signal dropping out because of the weather?
Yes, maybe. And I'll be honest, we could very easily do that. We could just add in an extra filter on the end that makes it sound like an AM broadcast of the time. That would be very easy to do. The voice, you will notice that the voice part does obviously sound a bit different, because we've got that difference in the quality against, but then that's all part of that nostalgic part as well. So you've got the voice parts that still sound like they've come off, an AM radio in the 80s, but they've been very much cleaned up and taken away from the music, so we don't get that overlap as well. Because that's also the funny thing when we used to record off air. I mean, I don't know if you know yourself, but on a Sunday evening at 5 o'clock, we were all hovered over our radio cassette recorders with our fingers on play and record, weren't we, to try and cut out the DJs talking. But that's all part of that fun. So we've got the new music. We've got new recordings of the music. So the music is crystal clear, obviously. We've got the DJs over the top of that. And it's just, it's just something that's not been done before, I don't think.
Yeah, I think it's the first time I've heard of it. So do you think it's going to be quite popular because it's never been done before? So people, even if they're not a fan, will tune out of curiosity.
Very possibly, very possibly. And you've always got that problem with something new. A lot of people don't like anything new, don't like change. I get it. But it is what it is. And, it's for people that remember the station. And there are still, there are a number of Facebook pages and Twitter pages, and there are radio support groups, and lots of people remember the station at the time, and other pirate stations like it. Caroline's the other very famous one at the time. Caroline is still going in some form as well. So it's like I said, the radio spectrum these days, and you tune through, there are so many niche radio stations. This is another one in there. Have a go, have a listen, see what you think.
And you've, of course, been in the radio industry for decades. So how do you see the evolution of radio technology over those years?
We've actually still got a lot of the basics are obviously still very much the same. We're using a lot of techniques now that were used a long time ago. For example, voice tracking. If people don't know what voice tracking is, imagine a DJ going into a radio studio, and instead of doing a 3-hour show, he's just in there recording the links in between, and he can knock out a 3-hour show in about 20-25 minutes. So that's good for the station. They're only paying somebody for 25 minutes of work rather than a 3-hour show. But it also means that they can play about that as much as they want. That's not a new thing. That was years ago. I remember this massive tape and cart system where it was done in a very, very similar way. So it's nothing new. It's becoming more common. And now, of course, you've got the introduction of AI, and there's a few radio stations in America that have just launched their first solely AI-generated DJ. So the music plays, and the AI voice reads what's coming next and comes up with all the patter as well in between.
Yeah.
I don't think I would like to go that way. There's something there that just takes that feel, and with certain words you can pick out an AI voice if you're listening hard enough. So I don't think we'd want to go that way.
Yeah, I think the AI voices that have came out so far, they lack any kind of humanness. They're just very straight talking, like, coming up later we're going to have this song, but first it's this other song. It's not how an actual presenter would speak.
There's no emotion, is there? There's absolutely no emotion there. Yeah, it's missing that. And then you can tell, like, every now and again, the mispronunciation of some words, and you just think, okay, who am I listening to?
Yeah. Although you get that with humans too sometimes.
You do, absolutely. But yeah, it's I would imagine eventually it's the way it's going to go. It's always going to come down to money, isn't it? And the more stations you've got, there's only so many pounds out there that people are spending, and so many stations fighting for your money. The costs have got to be cut. As I say, they're already cutting costs with DJs, presenters on radio stations at the moment. I would imagine it's the wave of the future.
How do you think our listening habits will change? Because of course, Laser 558, when it launched, was quite revolutionary. 54 minutes of music every hour. Whereas these days, you could argue some people would rather just listen to a Spotify playlist or whatever.
Absolutely. I think that's the beauty of the technology we've got these days. It just all comes down to choice. It comes down to choice. I remember the same argument when Sky TV and all the cable companies were offering so many extra channels, and everyone says, why do we need all these extra channels for? We've already got 4.
Yeah.
And it's just, it gives people choice, and it makes people up their game a little bit as well, or you would hope it makes people up their game a little bit as well. And as I say, that's where Laser 558 really came into its own back in the 80s, because at the time licenses were very strict, copyright laws were very strict. Laser 558 came along and showed that you can play oldies as well as new songs at the time, and certainly the independent radio stations argued the fact as well to the broadcasting authorities at the time and said, we want a second station. They said, well, no, you can't. Well, hang on a minute. There's a demand for this. We want it. And it took years. I think Sovereign Sound was the first oldest station, and Capital Gold was the second, launching in, was it 85, 86 or something? But that was all born from Laser 558. So it's one of those stations that, although it was only on air for not even 2 years, changed the radio industry in the UK massively, that a lot of people just don't realise. So it's one of those things where there is a lot of history tied up around it, even if it's not from laser itself.
Yeah. And for your own recreation of Laser 558, is the project complete and sort of ready to listen to and you don't need to add anything to it now? Or do you think it will always be improved upon?
It will always be improved upon. I'll be honest, these are very early days. We've got a radio station. It's up and running, all fully licensed and registered. And we are just constantly building. Luckily, people are sending us messages all the time. Oh, I found this old tape in the attic, or I've got this recording off air. And it's like, great, send it to us. We'll record it, we'll process it, we'll send it back to you. Because, as I said, there are only a limited number of recordings out there. So, the more that we can get our hands on, the more we can strip down and we can add to the station and evolve it as it goes. We're working on one show at a time. So although the whole station is up and running and it's 24-hour, we're building each show as we go. So the more off-air recordings we find, the more we can process, the more we can upload, and it will be evolving as well. So yeah, fantastic.
Excellent. Well, in the meantime, where can we find the station and tune in right now?
Everywhere. You can go to www.laser558.live. That's your main port of call. All the links are on there. We've got a Twitter account, Laser558, Facebook page and group. Just search for Laser558. We're also on MyTuner. We're also on Get Me Radio. We've just launched yesterday a YouTube channel as well where you can stream from YouTube. Just go Google.
Yes, there's no excuse not to listen. You're on all the directories. Easy to find. Well, many thanks for joining us. It's been great to talk to you.
Not a problem. Thank you very much, Toby. Thanks for having me.